Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, as you know, we have organized series of lecture on public administration, and you might also be aware about that how to study public administration. There are various approaches like scientific approach, management approach, classical approach, and etc. And today we are going to discuss a very important approach to study public administration, that is behavioral approach of administration. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio Dr. Mani Hussain. He is Associate Professor at Dal Singh College, University of Delhi, and he has also in his credit several publications in different journals. So on your behalf, I welcome him for a EduSet lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. A very good afternoon to all of you. In our previous meetings, of course through television, we have already had a view of the scientific management approach, the classical approach, the Weberian bureaucratic model. Within the classical, we discussed Fayol, Gully, Gerwig, and then we discussed Elton Mayo's human relations approach. And then we discussed systems approach. Today we will be dealing with another very important approach to the study of public administration, which is known as the behavioral approach, Vyavharvadi. Behavioral revolution is a concept, is a term which every student of social science has been aware of, be it sociology, psychology, political science, any social science you pick up, and you will find a reference to the behavioral revolution. Even in public administration, we did have this impact of behavioral revolution on the study of public administration. Chester Bernard's book, Functions of the Executive, is considered to be the book which marked the beginning of the behavioral era in public administration. Though now it is not so much in prominence, but its contribution is immense and it cannot be undermined. We must know what this approach is all about. Behavioral approach emerged as a reaction to the traditional, historical and normative approaches, and emphasized that the study should be based on empiricism. It should be empirical studies based on field research, lab experiments, statistics and other mathematical tools. This approach wants to make the study of public administration scientific. What is scientific? This means that it should be based on systematic, cross-cultural, cross-national, cross-structural empirical studies. Another very distinctive feature of this behavioral approach is that it wants the studies to be descriptive rather than prescriptive. Descriptive means that it should be concentrating on what is rather than what should be. Should be is prescriptive. Behavioral approach believes that because human actions are guided by several factors, psychological, social, economic, political, and so administrative behavior or human behavior can be studied only through an interdisciplinary approach. So interdisciplinary is also one of the very important factors of the behavioral approach. It wants the study to be interdisciplinary. It wants it to be descriptive. It wants it to be empirical. The approach emphasizes on individual-based realistic research concerning motivation, decision-making, authority, communication, etc. It is argued that public administration should involve scientific study of individual and collective human behavior in administrative situations. As the name itself suggests, behavioral approach. It has to do with behavior. Normally, the focus is individual, though at times some collective behavior is also taken into account, but emphasis is on individual. Individual is the focus. So any individual is sum total of is the social, psychological, political and economic aspects, and if he does something, if he acts in a particular way, if he behaves in a particular way, it is because of his inside that he does so. So the inside of the human beings becomes the study material for the behavioral approach, the inside of the human beings. And because organizations are constituted by human beings, the organizational realities can be understood in terms of inside of the human beings. So inside of the human beings in any organization becomes as important as the inside of the organization itself. Now, there have been quite a few behavioralists whose contributions have enriched the discipline of public administration. But one area has, of course, there are others also which we will be taking up later on, like communication and authority and motivation, etc. Decision making emerged as a very important theme for the behavioralists, and there Herbert Simon emerged as the most important contributor, though others also contributed, but decision making and Herbert Simon almost become inseparable. So we will today concentrate on decision making and Herbert Simon. Herbert Simon has analyzed human behavior in terms of its value preference in decision making process. Any decision that is taken has to be a combination of value preference and some factual analysis, but we will come to that later. While criticizing the classical school, Fayol, Gullick, Irving, etc., especially Gullick and Irving, Herbert Simon had said that the principles were mere proverbs which had limited local application. Principles were not universal as claimed by the classical school theorists. And he argues then that while the principles are not universal, of a universal application, it is decision making which is a universal process and can be the frame of reference for wider organizational analysis and theorization. Everywhere, any organization anywhere in the world cannot do without the process of decision making. Some decisions are programmed, routine decisions, and some are taken in exigencies or in cases of emergencies. So decisions have to be taken every day. Some decisions which are of wider consequences take more time to arrive at, but some are routine matters. So decision making is something which is universal, any organization anywhere in the world cannot do without this process. But before discussing Herbert Simon, let us first discuss a few important observations regarding the phenomenon of decision making. What is decision making? 1. Decision making deals with the process of choice which leads to action. Before you do something, you make a choice internally. I am going to do this. I am going to do this because of this. By doing this, I will arrive at this. So, any human action is preceded by a choice that he makes on the basis of various factors. So, decision making deals with the process of choice which leads to action. In other words, it refers to the process that precedes action, the whole process that precedes action. Second, decision making can be defined as a process of reducing the alternatives to one. At any given point of time, there will be several alternatives, several options. What do you actually do is a matter of choice, a preference. Inside, you make a decision that, well, there are, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, but at the moment I will do this. So, decision making is a process of arriving at one of the many alternatives. Well, this is what I am going to do. J.S. March talked about a three-stage decision problem, three-stage problem in taking decisions in complex environment of business organizations. What are they? 1. Which of the many problems the executive should direct his attention to? Now, when we are talking about an organization, there can be many issues before the executive. Now, the first problem is to prioritize, to choose which problem he is going to attend to. Second, how much time, effort and expense should he invest in resolving uncertainty about that problem? There are many problems out of which he has arrived at the decision to stick to one, to attend to one. Now, that particular problem has to be resolved. Now, the second call, the second problem before the executive is to identify or to ascertain or to decide how much time, effort and expense should he be investing in resolving the issue. Because any organization works under certain limitations of time and resources. So, the problem is grave, it has to be tackled, but how much time and resources and effort can be put in has to be decided first before you initiate an action. Third, which of the many solutions to the problem should he use? Now, the executive knows that this problem has to be tackled first. He also knows how much time and resources he has to resolve the issue, but he should also know that for any problem there are many solutions, and which solution is the best solution, that is also a conscious decision. When at times people talk of trial and error method, but trial and error method cannot be taken as very scientific. Here the emphasis is on making the study scientific, and so the behavioralists want to understand the alternative solutions and then identification of the best solution to resolve the issue. Now, if the executive tackles these three questions properly, he will arrive most likely on the correct decision. And the regularity of correct decisions by the executive will improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization. Now, decision has to be taken on the basis of these three questions. You tackle these questions properly, you arrive at correct decisions, and the regularity with which you take correct decisions will improve the conditions, improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization. And the art of correct decision making, scholars have claimed, gets better with practice. Third, it is important to understand that decision is means to an end and not an end in itself. Decision is means to an end, not an end in itself. What does this mean? This means that there are problems which need solutions. The organization has set certain goals for which you have to strive. And in the process of resolving all the problems and issues and arriving at or attaining those goals, decisions have to be taken. And so decisions are moments in the process of goal achievement or policy formulation or policy making. Fourth, another important factor is that decision making is a cooperative venture. Decision making, while in the ultimate analysis, it is the executive who is taking the decision. The final decision is being taken by the executive, but it is a plural activity. Many people's efforts are involved. Before the executive takes the final decision, he has to tackle the three questions that March had put forth. Which of the problems? One individual cannot understand and know everything. So it's a plural activity. Which is most potent problem? Then which solution is the most important, most potent, most rational? Again, the executive will need support. So it is a plural activity. Fifth, there are some common bases of decision making. On what is decision making based? First, initiation. For any decision making, the first and the foremost thing is to identify the problems. You start thinking what the problems are. How can you improve upon and resolve? Facts. Everything possible about the problems and the solutions. All the related facts. If this is a problem, what can be the possible reasons? What is the effect of this problem? And then the solutions. How many types of solutions are possible and which solution can be most appropriate? So, for everything you need factual information. Third, experience. Now, experience can be the executive's own experience, it can be the experience of the organization, and it can be experience of others outside the organization. Somewhere else something had happened and then you decide on the basis of the experience there. And fourth, authority to take decision. Many a times what happens is that the processes, as we discussed earlier, while you are identifying the problems, there are many people who are involved. When you are identifying the solutions and making a comparative study, there are many people who are involved. But not everyone has the authority to take decision. The executive who has the who has the authority, only he can take the decision. So many a times what happens in organizations, there are people who are trying to understand the problem and the best possible solution, do not understand that unless they have the required authority, the decision, they cannot take decision, and then that decision will not be valid. The sixth issue is the problems in decision making. There, every time you make a decision or the executive makes a decision, he faces certain problems. What are those problems? Involvement in routine work. Now, any organization which is functioning, which is working towards a particular towards achievement of a particular goal, has to do things every day of a routine nature, and many a times we find that the routine work is so much that he hardly is left with any time and energy to involve in taking decisions of some different nature, identification of the problems and solution. I mean, okay, things are moving, chalta hai, chal raha hai. So second problem is prioritization of problems. Now, many a times what happens is that there are problems and one problem appears to be very big. This is very big. But when you are prioritizing the problems to arrive at solutions or to resolve, it is not only on the basis of the impact or effect of the problem, but also on the basis of the resources that you have. Am I in a position to resolve this issue at the moment? This is a very important question that the executive must ask himself before he takes up the problem. So, when you are prioritizing, the executive must take into account the potency of the problem and the availability of resources to resolve that problem. Third problem is choosing the right decision. Now, this is a very pressing problem. In large scale organizations, it is not possible to determine the rightness or wrongness of every decision. So, you take a decision and there are many decisions which are taken in a particular direction, and the impact is actually seen on the basis of all the decisions, not a single decision. So, it is in complex organizations, it becomes very difficult to identify the rightness or to ascertain the rightness or wrongness of one particular decision. Fourth problem is bias. A decision is a deliberate act. You choose, you make a preference. It is deliberate, of course, on the basis of your understanding, your analysis, whatever. But at the end of it, the executive has made a choice. He has preferred a particular problem to tackle or a particular solution to resolve the problem, and therefore it's bound to have some sort of bias. Now, coming to the seventh issue. If decisions are based on objective considerations rather than subjective considerations, adverse impact of avoidable bias of unavoidable. See, bias is unavoidable, but the adverse impact can be reduced. Adverse impact of or effect of bias can be minimized on the basis of objective considerations rather than subjective considerations. So instead of elimination of bias, which is not possible, the executive tries to utilize his bias to strike a balance between different types of bias and the conflicting interests. So this was the background on the issue of decision making, and now we come to Herbert Simon. Herbert Simon, who, as I said in the beginning, emerged as synonym for decision making theory. Herbert Simon blended the economic with the philosophical thought. He blended economic thought with philosophical thought and laid the foundation of modern theory of decision making. He said that the philosophers were the initiators, but because of the era he was writing in, the impact of capitalism, and so he blended the economic thought with philosophical thought to arrive at his theory of decision making. Now, the salient features of Simon's theory, the most important features. The first, every decision is a logical combination of fact and value propositions. Whenever one is taking a decision, it's a logical combination of fact and value. What is factual? Which can be proved true or false. Factual is something which can be proved true or false. Valuational is preferential, it cannot be proved true or false. Now, when one is making a selection, making a preference, making a choice, it is value judgment. It has to be value judgment, because all the facts cannot be known. It's humanly impossible. And so, whenever we are making a choice, we are making a value judgment. But when we are implementing something, there we can be factual. I mean, for example, a decision to take walk for good health. Now, it is a value judgment. I mean, whether I am going for a morning walk or evening walk or slow strolling or brisk walk or jogging, I have made a decision on the basis of my understanding and my convenience. But then comes the factual part. You cannot take a walk on a busy road, so you have to choose either a park or a field, or at least a pavement footpath. Then you have to again see that you are not, suppose it is summer and you have to walk. Can you walk during daytime? No. So factual things come in. It will be very hot during day, so we should take a walk either in the morning or evening. We should avoid the traffic hour. If there are trees around, it will be better because we get oxygen, more oxygen there. So these are certain things which we take into account when we are implementing that decision. Second feature is that decision is a choice between several alternatives. Simon says that at any given point of time, whenever you are taking a decision, you are up against several alternatives, and a decision is a choice that you are making for one. This idea has been derived from economics. The alternative which is best yielding, which yields the best results, is selected. Economic rationality. The decision making process involves three important phases as activities. The first phase is called intelligence activity. It involves finding occasions to take decisions. By the executive on the basis of his analysis and understanding of the organizational environment and needs. The executive has to have a view of the environment in his organization, in and around his organization, and the needs of the organization. On the basis of that understanding and his analysis, he will find occasions to take decisions. Second phase is design activity. Design activity involves analysis of alternatives to do a particular job or perform a particular task or address a particular issue. The executive has to do it keeping in view the positives and negatives involved in each of the alternatives. There are many alternatives. Every alternative will have positives and negatives. Keeping in view which one gives more positives and less negatives, the executive analyzes the alternatives to select one. And third phase is choice activity. It involves selection of one of the alternatives for action, keeping in view the organizational goals as well as resources. You have understood the problems, what problem are you going to address, then you have worked out the various alternatives, what are the positives, what are the negatives, and then you make a choice about the alternative that you feel is the best in view of the organizational goals and resources. Fourth characteristic is that the choice should be rational. Simon says that this choice that the executive has made has to be rational. Now, what is rational? Rational, you project in future. Well, if I do this, this will be the consequence, these will be the positives, these will be the negatives. Do the positives outweigh the negatives? If yes, then the decision is rational. If there are more positives and less negatives, the choice is rational. Now, but the problem is that for any problem there can be n number of solutions. All the solutions will have n number of consequences. It is humanly impossible to know all the solutions of all the problems, and of those solutions, all the positives and all the negatives. It is humanly impossible. So, optimum or objective rationality is not possible. Objective rationality is not possible because no executive will know all the solutions of all the problems and all the consequences of all the solutions. So objective rationality is out of question. Then what are we left with? Simon says we are left with bounded rationality, bounded rationality, where we know some solutions and of those solutions some consequences. In other words, that we have identified a problem and we are going to resolve it. We try to arrive at a rational decision. For that, we identify the various alternative solutions, and for each one of them we identify the positives and negatives. The one alternative which has more positives and less negatives is the alternative that the executive chooses. Now this may or may not maximize the goal, or may or may not be the best solution, or cannot lead to higher goals. But the option that one has is this, because there are problems. The problems are of skills. The executive may not have all the skills required to arrive at to understand everything. There are issues of habit. Executive may be having a particular habit because of which certain alternatives will just be discarded by him. Third will be values. He may have a particular value preference. He may be coming from a background where the value preference about something would be very intense, and that will restrict him from taking a decision in favor of some alternatives. Conception of the purpose. Many a times involved in the routine matters and problem firefighting, the executive may lose sight of the purpose. And relevant knowledge. The executive he has knowledge, but relevant knowledge about a particular solution may not be there, and so these are the limitations within which the executive has to make his choices, and so his being objective, completely, perfectly objective, perfectly rational is not possible according to Herbert Simon. Extending his concept of bounded rationality, Herbert Simon talks of another concept called the concept of satisficing behavior. Satisficing. This term has been derived from two words, satisfaction and sufficing. Satisfaction, you are satisfied, and sufficing, sufficient, just enough. When you add these two words, the term satisficing emerges. As perfect rationality is not possible, and the decision may or may not lead to maximization of organizational goals, the executive satisfices by making a good enough choice, because optimum rationality is not possible, the perfect rationality is not possible. So the executive satisfices by making a good enough choice. What is good enough? When he feels or believes that he has done whatever best he could given the circumstances. In the given circumstances, he has done whatever best he could. That is, he has identified as many alternative solutions as possible. He has analyzed all those solutions, come up with as many positives and negatives for each one of them, and then made a selection on the basis of maximum positives and minimum negatives. So, if he has done that, even though it is not perfectly rational, it is satisficing. When we were talking about the problems in decision making, we missed out one aspect, that is Herbert Simon calls it sunk cost. Sunk, S-U-N-K, sunk cost. What is sunk cost? What happens is that decisions are taken periodically in a routine manner, sometimes in exigencies, in emergencies. Now, a decision that had been taken earlier, when the executive is to take a decision now, that decision which was taken earlier becomes an impediment, becomes a barrier, because a decision had been taken and the impact was not as good or desirable. So, now even though the executive feels that that alternative is the best, he cannot choose that because of that history. This is called sunk cost. Another problem that the executive faces in making rational choice is when there are conflicting interests or groups in an organization, a large organization especially, then the executive knowingly does not take the most appropriate decision. The decision that he will take will have something for both the or all the conflicting groups. Such decisions are called coalition decisions. Coalition, which will give some benefit to all the warring or conflicting groups. By arriving at such decisions, the executive tries to balance the interest groups, the conflicting interest groups. This is also called games theory. The next important feature is that decisions, according to Herbert Simon, are programmed as well as non-programmed. There are two types of decisions that the executive has to take: programmed decisions and non-programmed decisions. Programmed decisions are repetitive and routine in nature. Every day it is happening, especially in bureaucracy, in government service. There are rules and regulations, and according to that, decisions are taken in a routine manner. For example, the licensing authority. There are certain rules and regulations on the basis of which one goes there, applies, a test is taken, and a test ride is given, and then license is issued. So that for that decision, everything has been conditioned. There are rules and regulations. There are the pattern is fixed. On that basis, you can or you may or may not get driving license. Non-programmed decisions, on the other hand, are the ones which for which the executive does not have guiding principles or rules and regulations. The decision has to be taken by him personally, individually, and independently. There's no guiding rules and regulations. However, it is argued that no decision can be completely programmed or completely non-programmed. It has to be a combination of both. Now, there are some recent trends in this whole area of decision making. The first trend is emphasis on rationality. Herbert Simon said, what is rational? You have all the alternatives examined and analyzed, and the most positives and least negatives would make an alternative the most acceptable. Now, here the recent trends are are towards having more and more alternatives and more consequences of those alternatives studied. If there is a problem, there can be alternative solutions, more and more solutions, and for every solution, more and more consequences must be studied. The second trend is towards reduction in the element of human irrationality. Human irrationality, as we discussed earlier, on the basis of values and skills and knowledge and understanding of the purpose, etc., etc. So, these are human irrationalities. So, one has to reduce or minimize. The third is the issue of acceptability. Now, any decision, when we were talking about decision making, we concentrated on the executive. The executive has taken a decision, but that decision, to have any impact, must be accepted. So, what do you do for acceptability? So, for the decision can be made acceptable by force, which is not a very healthy way of doing it. Second is by taking recourse to emotional appeal or hypnotism, which is again very short-lived. At times you may succeed, at times you may not succeed. And the third is the method of consultation. Without this, if any authority, any executive does not resort to consultation, it is damaging and dangerous for the organization. So, if you have taken a decision, you want to take a decision, it has to have acceptability, and for that consultation is the most important tool. And another recent development has been in the field of improvement in the art of decision making. How can you improve? One, by observing, analyzing, retrospecting, and policing your own behavior and decisions. Second, observing others' behavior and decisions. And third, by training. So, these are the recent trends in decision making. Do we have time for we have some. So, some criticisms of the behavioral approach, especially in terms of decision making. One problem is that the difference between man as a social animal and the administrative man is very, very important to understand, which here in this theory of decision making seems to have been lost. We talk of administrative settings and administrative behavior as if the human being does not have any links outside the organization. Now, behavioral science is more suitable for study and analysis of small social groups, but when we talk of large organizations, it does not have that relevance. We should take questions now.
What do you say that this behavioral approach, how do it strengthen the decision making approach and make to the people friendly administration?
See, as the decision making approach emphasizes on various alternatives to resolve the various problems. Involvement of people is very, very important. Decision is taken by the executive, but it is a plural activity, and any authority who does not understand this aspect is liable to make mistake, and the organization is liable to decline. He has to take the views of the people if he has to
Before
actually
taking a concrete decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Consultation, as we were discussing, consultation is the key.
Okay. But in that case, the decision may be delayed.
At times, it may, and in cases of emergency, many at times decisions have to be taken at once. So, but then there are exceptions rather than rules. I mean, if there is a fire or a flood or something of that sort which has come suddenly, then of course you have to take on the spot decision. But in most other cases, even howsoever pressing the problem may be, it gives you time to consult others. No individual wisdom can be better than collective wisdom.
Okay. So consultation is in focus in behavioral approach.
No,
Yeah.
this is what has been emphasized by recent trends.
In administration.
Initially, Herbert Simon did talk of decision being a plural activity, but he did not place as much emphasis on on consultation as he did on the executive's role in making decisions.
Okay. So how this approach is different from the NPA, New Public Administration?
New public administration is it emerged much later, and because of the changing realities, new public administration actually emerged after this globalization became very important all over the globe. But before that, behavioral revolution during 50s and part of 60s was guiding almost the whole of social science fraternity. It was challenged for the first time by the post-behavioralists, who said that behavioral revolution was so much engrossed in tools and techniques and mathematics and statistics that it lost sight of the problem. When you are trying to ascertain the positives and negatives of solutions through mathematical models and tools and techniques, many a times they lost sight of the problem itself. And so the slogan that emerged then was credo of relevance. They said that behavioral approach had made public administration irrelevant.
Okay.
And so you have to come back to make it relevant, by making it value free. I mean, that was the call. Make it value free. It has to be scientific.
How that could be in a country like India, where the value is even more important than the action?
Anywhere, value is important. The thing is, I mean, Herbert Simon himself accepts that bias is unavoidable. But when you are making a choice, when you are preferring something over the other, that value, that bias has to be utilized in favor of the organization, in favor of the goal that or the purpose that you exist for. You cannot make it value free. It is neither possible nor desirable.
Okay. So, you want what you suggest? What more could we do? Could we more step need to be taken to make the administration pro people and the welfare in a welfare direction?
See, the problem is complex, because economics has become so important that rational decision essentially means the decision which will yield the maximum results.
Okay.
But there are issues. For example, when India became independent, health was a big concern everywhere. Most of the hospitals, because India was predominantly an agricultural rural society, should have been established in rural areas, but it did not happen so. Most of the hospitals are based in cities even now, in towns. Why? Because here the paying capacity of the people is more, and in the villages they would not be getting economic returns, financial returns, what they are getting in towns and cities.
Okay.
So economic rationality at times weighs over value.
Okay.
I mean, had we gone in for hospitals, giving license to hospitals only in rural areas, that would have been a value-based decision.
Okay.
But instead of that, we allowed them to operate in towns and cities.
Okay. So, well, friends, with these words, we conclude the lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on behalf, I thank Dr. Manibhushan for giving such an insightful lecture. Thank you very much.